December 5th, 1945, Naval Air Station, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. 5 Navy bombers take off on a routine training flight. 2 hours later, this is the last thing anyone hears from them.
"We can't tell which way is west. Everything looks strange, even the ocean."
14 men, 5 aircraft. They were never found. Not a wing, not a body, not a single piece of debris. They flew into a clear blue sky, and they vanished. For 60 years, this story has been told in only 2 ways. Either the Bermuda Triangle is a paranormal death zone full of aliens, sea monsters, and underwater portals, or it's a complete hoax invented by a 1960s magazine writer to sell copies. I spent 3 weeks going through the original Coast Guard records, the radio transcripts, the Lloyd's List shipping data, and the actual aviation reports from every disappearance you've ever heard of. Both stories are wrong. What actually happened in this stretch of ocean is stranger than the conspiracy theorists realize, and far more disturbing than the skeptics will admit. By the end of this video, you'll know the one thing nobody tells you about the Bermuda Triangle. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. First, the obvious question: where actually is the Bermuda Triangle? The answer is nowhere. Officially, it's not on a single nautical chart. The U.S. Coast Guard refuses to recognize it as a navigational hazard. No AA, the agency responsible for ocean monitoring, has a public statement saying it does not believe the triangle exists. Insurance companies treat it the same as any other patch of the Atlantic. And yet, when you draw a rough triangle between Miami, San Juan, and the island of Bermuda, you cover an area roughly the size of Alaska, 750,000 square miles of ocean that has accumulated more legends per square mile than any other body of water on Earth. So here's the first weird thing about this story. Every official source says nothing unusual happens here, and every unofficial source says something is very wrong. Both of them have evidence. What's really happening in the Bermuda Triangle? Let me start with the most famous case, the one Steven Spielberg used in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Flight 19. On December 5, 1945, 5 Avenger torpedo bombers took off from Florida for a 3-hour training mission. Their leader was Lieutenant Charles Taylor, a decorated combat pilot with over 2,500 hours in the air. About 90 minutes in, Taylor radioed the tower with something strange. He said his compass was malfunctioning. He didn't know where he was. He thought he was over the Florida Keys, south of the mainland. The tower told him to head west. He didn't. For the next hour, the planes flew further out into the Atlantic. The radio transmissions get more confused, more frightened.
"It looks like we're entering white water. We're completely lost."
Then silence. A rescue plane was sent out, a Martin Mariner with 13 men aboard. It also disappeared. No wreckage from any of the 6 aircraft has ever been found. The official Navy report concluded that, and I quote, "They flew off to Mars." This is the moment. This is when the legend of the Bermuda Triangle really begins. 6 aircraft, 27 men, gone, in clear weather, off the coast of one of the most surveilled stretches of ocean in America. Hold on to Flight 19. We're coming back to it. 27 years before Flight 19, in March 1918, the USS Cyclops set sail from Brazil to Baltimore. She was a 542-foot Navy collier, bigger than a modern football field, carrying 306 men and 10,000 tons of manganese ore. She made an unscheduled stop in Barbados to take on more coal. Then she headed north into the Atlantic. And then, nothing. No wreckage, no survivors, no distress signal. This is the part that bothers me. The Cyclops had 2 functioning radios. She had a trained signals officer. She was on a heavily traveled shipping route during peacetime in this area. There was no enemy submarine action this far west. Other ships passed through the same waters that week and reported nothing unusual. And she vanished without sending a single signal. The Navy launched the largest peacetime search operation in its history up to that point. They found nothing. 306 men and a ship the length of 2 city blocks disappeared into ocean that other vessels were crossing safely on the same day. President Woodrow Wilson made a statement that has been quoted in every Bermuda Triangle book since.
Only God and the sea know what happened to the great ship.
And here's where it gets stranger. In 1941, 23 years later, 2 of the Cyclops' sister ships, the Proteus and the Nereus, vanished along nearly the same route. Same design, same cargo, same silence. 3 identical ships, 3 different decades, the same patch of ocean. Either someone is trying to tell us something, or someone is trying to hide something. For decades, these incidents were treated as separate maritime tragedies. Sad, mysterious, unconnected. That changed in February 1964. A pulp magazine writer named Vincent Gaddis wrote an article for Argosy magazine called The Deadly Bermuda Triangle. He drew the triangle, he named it, and he made one critical move. He connected dots between incidents that had nothing to do with each other across more than 400 years. 10 years later, a paranormal author named Charles Berlitz wrote a book using the same name. It sold 20 million copies in 30 languages. Berlitz claimed the triangle was connected to the lost city of Atlantis, that ships were being pulled into another dimension, that aliens were using it as an abduction site. He had no evidence for any of this, but he didn't need any. The 1970s wanted mysteries. NASA had just landed on the moon. Science was answering everything. People needed something to be unexplained, and the Bermuda Triangle delivered. But here's the thing nobody mentions. Gaddis and Berlitz weren't lying, exactly. They just stopped checking facts. Multiple incidents in their books didn't happen the way they described. Some happened nowhere near the triangle. Some happened in good weather that they reported as storms. Some involved ships that, according to Lloyd's of London, never went missing at all. The triangle wasn't discovered. It was constructed. Okay, setting Atlantis aside, let's look at what serious science actually has to say. 2 main theories. The first one is the most dramatic and the most recent. In 2016, researchers at the Arctic University of Norway discovered something disturbing on the floor of the Barents Sea. Craters, massive ones, up to half a mile wide and 150 meters deep. Hundreds of them. What they figured out was that the seafloor there contains huge deposits of frozen methane, what's called methane hydrate, locked in the sediment under pressure and cold. When something disturbs that sediment, the methane can escape in a single, violent release, a burp of gas the size of a small skyscraper. And here's why this matters for ships. A ship floats because the water beneath it is denser than the ship itself. But if you suddenly pump that water full of methane bubbles, it stops being water. It becomes a frothy mixture that's much less dense. The ship loses buoyancy almost instantly. It doesn't sink. It falls into the ocean like a rock. Researchers have tested this in a tank, a scale model of a ship floating peacefully on the surface. Bubbles released from below. The ship goes straight down in less than a second. No warning. no SOS time, no debris field at the surface. This is the closest thing to a smoking gun the Bermuda Triangle has ever had. The seafloor in this region does contain methane hydrate. The 2016 paper listed the Bermuda Triangle as one of the regions where this could occur. So is this it? Is the mystery solved? Not quite. There's a problem. The frequency. Researchers estimate methane blowouts in any given location happen on geological timescales, once every few thousand years. Not exactly enough to sink 3 ships in 3 decades. The methane theory is real. The methane theory is plausible. The methane theory probably explains a few historical wrecks, but it doesn't explain the pattern. Something else has to be going on. The second theory is older, less dramatic, and probably more important. Rogue waves. For most of maritime history, sailors who reported walls of water taller than their ships were dismissed as drunks or liars. Real waves, scientists insisted, didn't get that big. The math didn't allow it. Then, on the 1st of January 1995, an oil platform in the North Sea called Dropner was struck by a wave. The platform's instruments measured it precisely. The wave was 84 feet tall, 26 meters, the size of an 8-story building. The math, it turned out, was wrong. We now know that rogue waves are not only real, but relatively common. Roughly 1 in every 10,000 waves is a rogue wave. They form when smaller waves combine through what's called constructive interference. Multiple wave trains stacking on top of each other for a single instant. They appear without warning. They disappear within seconds. They can break a 200-meter container ship in half. And here's the relevant part. The Bermuda Triangle sits at the intersection of 2 things that make rogue waves more likely. First, the Gulf Stream, a current of water moving so fast it can push a ship hundreds of miles off course in a single night. Second, the Atlantic Hurricane Corridor, the most active tropical storm region in the Western Hemisphere. Combine fast currents with frequent storms, and you get the perfect engine for generating rogue waves. Ships caught in this region don't just face rough seas. They face seas that can produce a single freak event that ends the voyage in seconds, with no time for a distress call and no debris that doesn't get swept away by the current within hours. This explains a lot, maybe even most of it. But it still doesn't explain Flight 19. So we've got methane explosions, 100-foot rogue waves, the world's busiest hurricane region. Case closed, right? The Bermuda Triangle is dangerous because of natural causes. Mystery solved. That's where every other documentary about this stops. And that's where every other documentary about this is wrong. Because here's what happens when you actually look at the numbers. In 2021, Lloyd's List, the global shipping industry's official record of vessels and incidents, published their data for the year. 8,634 ships passed through the Bermuda Triangle that year. Of those, exactly 2 had a serious incident. 2. That's an incident rate of 0.02%. For comparison, the global average for ship incidents anywhere on Earth is 1.8%, which means, and you should sit down for this, the Bermuda Triangle is approximately 90 times safer than the global ocean average. It's not in the world's top 10 most dangerous maritime regions. It's not in the top 20. The South China Sea, the Mediterranean, the West African coast, the Indian Ocean, all of them statistically much more dangerous than the Bermuda Triangle. The Marine Casualty Database, which tracks shipping incidents from 1982 to 2015, found that of 9,000 documented incidents in that period, only 4% occurred in the Bermuda Triangle. And here's the kicker. None of them were classified as disappearances. Not one. For aviation, the National Transportation Safety Board has only one recorded incident in the airspace over Bermuda in the last 60 years. A JetBlue flight with severe turbulence. One injury. Everyone landed. So when people say something is wrong in the Bermuda Triangle, statistically, the opposite is true. Something is unusually right. There is no Bermuda Triangle problem. And yet, 5 Avengers and a mariner with 27 men aboard did vanish in 1945. The Cyclops did vanish in 1918. The Proteus and Nereus did vanish in 1941. These aren't ghost stories. They happened. And here's where the official skeptic narrative breaks down. Because if there's nothing unusual about this region, if the data is conclusive, then what actually happened to these people? Flight 19 has the most complete record. We have the full radio transcripts. We have the search reports. We have, decades later, expert analyses by aviation safety researchers. Here's what they found. Lieutenant Charles Taylor, the flight leader, had a pattern. He had previously gotten lost on at least 2 prior training flights. He had a history, documented in his Navy file, of confusing one body of water for another. On the morning of December 5, 1945, he showed up to the briefing late and asked to be excused from the flight. The request was denied. Once airborne, his compass reading conflicted with what his student pilots were reporting. Taylor insisted his compass was right. The students, less experienced and trained to defer to their commander, followed him. He led the formation east, deeper into the Atlantic, when their actual position required them to head west toward Florida. And here's the part the official Navy report buried. The other pilots, at multiple points during the flight, radioed each other suggesting they should turn west. Taylor overruled them. He kept insisting they were over the Gulf of Mexico, when they were actually over the open Atlantic. By the time fuel ran out, they were 200 miles from any land, in the dark, in rising seas. The bombers were not designed to ditch an open ocean. The crews had perhaps 2 minutes from impact to drowning. Flight 19 didn't disappear because of the Bermuda Triangle. Flight 19 disappeared because of one experienced pilot who refused to accept that he was wrong, and 4 less experienced pilots who didn't push back hard enough. It wasn't a paranormal event. It was a human one. And human events kill far more people than methane explosions ever will. Aviation safety researchers have a term for what happened to Lieutenant Taylor. They call it spatial disorientation. It's a state where a pilot's brain receives sensory information that contradicts what their instruments are telling them. And the brain, under stress, under fatigue, in low visibility, chooses to trust itself over the instruments. It is the leading cause of fatal general aviation accidents. It killed John F. Kennedy Jr. in 1999. It kills on average hundreds of pilots every year, worldwide, in every airspace, including ones that aren't called the Bermuda Triangle. At sea, there's a related phenomenon. Sailors call it get-there-itis, the captain who pushes through deteriorating weather because he's behind schedule. The crew that ignores warning signs because they want to be home for Christmas. The one bad decision made in the moment that turns a manageable situation into a catastrophic one. Now combine these 2 things with one more factor: selection bias. Of the millions of voyages and flights that have crossed this stretch of ocean over the past century, the ones we remember are exclusively the ones that went wrong. We don't have stories about the 8,632 ships that crossed the Bermuda Triangle in 2021 and arrived safely. We have stories about the two that didn't. Pull the same trick anywhere on Earth, and you can build a triangle. Draw a line between Lisbon, Cape Town, and Buenos Aires. Inside that triangle, the Atlantic has eaten thousands of ships, including the SS Waratah in 1909, a steamer that vanished with 211 people aboard, exactly the same way the Cyclops did. We don't have a name for that triangle. We don't have books about it. We don't have movies. The disappearances were just as mysterious. The ships were just as gone. The only difference is that nobody in 1964 wrote a magazine article about it. This is what nobody tells you about the Bermuda Triangle. The triangle isn't a place. It's a story. It's a frame we put around a normal stretch of ocean to make sense of an uncomfortable truth. That ships sink, that planes crash, that experienced people make catastrophic mistakes, and that sometimes the ocean swallows what it swallows and gives back nothing. And that's actually scarier than aliens, because it means there's no special zone, no protected waters. The same mistakes, the same physics, the same cognitive failures that killed Lieutenant Taylor and his men can happen anywhere, are happening right now, somewhere on the ocean. And there is no name for those triangles. There never will be. Listen to the radio transmission again, the one that opens this video.
We can't tell which way is west. Everything looks strange, even the ocean.
You probably heard those words and thought of something supernatural, a force pulling the planes off course, a hidden anomaly in the air. Listen again. Knowing what you know now, that's not a man encountering the unknown. That's a trained Navy pilot, 4 hours into a flight he never wanted to take, watching his compass disagree with everything his instincts are telling him, and slowly, in real time, losing his mind. That's a man whose brain has decided that the ocean itself must be lying to him, because the alternative, that he's been leading his students in the wrong direction for 2 hours, is too unbearable to accept. Lieutenant Charles Taylor, Captain George W. Stivers, Marine Captain Edward Joseph, Marine Captain George Francis Devlin, and 9 more men whose names are on that list. They didn't get abducted. They didn't fall through a portal. They flew into the Atlantic, ran out of fuel, and went down in a black ocean in the middle of the night. They knew exactly what was happening to them. The radio transcripts make that very clear. And then the silence. I started this video looking for the secret of the Bermuda Triangle. What I found instead is that the triangle is real, but not in the way anyone tells the story. It's not a place where physics breaks. It's a place where humans break, and where humans have always broken, and where the broken pieces happen to wash up under a memorable name. The data is conclusive. The triangle, as a geographic anomaly, does not exist. There is no underwater portal. There is no curse. There is nothing in those waters that isn't in any other waters. And yet, the story refuses to die. People still believe. People still write books. People still make documentaries about lost cities and alien abductions in this stretch of ocean. Why? I think it's because the truth is heavier. The truth is that experienced people make fatal mistakes. The truth is that nature occasionally does things that our instruments can measure, but our minds can't accept. The truth is that the ocean is enormous and human attention is small, and the ones we remember are not the ones who survived. The Bermuda Triangle isn't out there in the Atlantic. It's in the part of us that needs the disappearance to mean something. Thanks for watching. If this changed how you see something, Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.